Okay. Sorry if you guys heard that. um, so every hour or so, you're supposed to give Gander Oceanic Control a position report, which I always found kind of disingenuous before GPS because you had absolutely no way of telling if you were on track, uh, on your course at all. If your ground speed was what you planned for, you really had no idea. So you just call them and tell them, "I'm still here. I'll let you know when I see land." First trip went pretty good until my boss lost his vacuum pump halfway across, and seeing we had really bad weather forecast over the Azores and it was going to be at night, he met me at the first of the Azores chain of islands, and we flew formation, uh, IMC, down to the Azores and didn't do quite a formation landing or approach, but he basically used me for his artificial horizon because he wasn't really current at his needle ball airspeed skills. So that was my very first leg, and I already had an adventure, because that's what ferry flying really is. It's the ultimate pilot's adventure. I mean, you jump in an airplane you've never seen before, never flown before, and fly to the other side of the planet. And even though you've got a relatively good idea of what you're doing and where you're going, as far as routes go, that changes. I mean, you get weather systems that pop up, and you might have to go to a completely different country than you planned on. Your overflight permit might get canceled or denied, and you might have to turn off your transponder and fly low and not tell anybody, or go around that. You're always going to end up with all kinds of uh, all kinds of challenges, and that's what I really love about being a ferry pilot is just the challenges. You're out there on your own. Any problems you have, you're gonna have to solve them yourself. There's no one to call. There's no timeout. You can't land and fix a problem. You have to figure it out on the fly and get the mission accomplished. Some things that we use to ensure our survival, because the biggest danger, of course, is ditching in the ocean, is we always carry a life raft, a ditch bag, and the all ever important Gumby suit, cold weather survival suit, ditching suit. It's a quarter-inch neoprene orange suit that just has one hole for your face. And when you're in a single engine airplane, unfortunately, you have to wear it the whole time because there's no room in the plane to put it on. You wouldn't have time to get it on anyway. So those things get pretty hot. Usually I'll wear it fully on for takeoff until I get high enough up, maybe about 10, 15,000 feet. Then I'll take it off over my shoulders and keep it wrapped around my waist. But you got to keep it around your waist the whole time. And that thing gets pretty stinky after a while, because you have to have that ditch suit. Because if you ditch in the ocean, even in warm water, but for sure in the North Atlantic, if you don't have your survival suit on, you're not going to survive. And also, you're going to have to get out with your raft and hopefully your ditch bag with some of your survival gear, but for sure, either your ELT, which we used back in the old days, or your EPIRB, which I have now. It's a nice small little unit that sends out a beacon to have them come find you. But that, of course, is assuming that you survive the ditching, because most people don't survive the ditching. Our company, like I said, we lost 3 pilots. We only know about one who got into the raft. We think the other 2 didn't make it out of the plane. And the one that got in the raft, he only was in there they only talked to him once after he got in the raft, and then they didn't have any more contact. Because most of these planes, they sink pretty quick, and getting out of the planes is really difficult, especially with the ferry tanks, because the ferry tanks, when we install them in the planes, we have a real big CG problem. Now, when we put in ferry tanks in the planes, we're allowed 25% over max gross in the planes, so they're heavy. But we're also allowed, or at least we used to be allowed, 2 inches aft CG. So that makes the planes relatively difficult to control if you get slow. To counteract that, we always have the ferry tanks smashed up as far forward as possible. So usually the pilot seat is jammed up about as far as you can so you can still fly, which makes it really difficult to get out of the plane even when it's sitting on the ramp. If you have to get out when you're upside down at night sinking, I was never really optimistic about my chances of getting out of that plane in those conditions. The other stuff, survival gear that we have to carry, is kind of depends on the trip. but often I'll have to carry gear that will get me through just about any environment on the planet, because I'll start off flying over the northern Canadian forest, really thick forests. Then I'll fly over the Greenland ice cap. So then you need Arctic survival, you need North Atlantic Ocean survival gear. Head down south over the Sahara, then you need desert survival gear, and then finish it up over the jungles of Africa. Then you need jungle survival. So, um, luckily, survival is kind of one of my hobbies. Has been since I was a Boy Scout. So I've always made little survival kits and kind of customized my kit to where I'm flying. So far, I haven't had to use any of that stuff, but it's always nice to have it along. So, like I mentioned, the trips are never completely smooth. I've never had a ferry trip that went exactly smooth, and I had lots and lots that had all kinds of major problems. I lost my alternator one night over the Sahara, and I had to fly for 8 hours with a flashlight in instrument conditions. That was pretty hand fly by holding the flashlight for 8 hours. That was a tough night. I've got lost over Africa, flying from Libreville, Gabon to Dodoma, Tanzania in a 210. Um, I knew this is also pre-GPS. I knew I was going to have no nav aids for a couple hours, but when I came time to pick up the next couple of VORs that were toward my destination, I never picked them up as the sun went down. And when I finally, after battling a line of thunderstorms, finally made it to my destination, which luckily was right on the nose, talking to the missionaries there who I was delivering the plane to, and they told me that those VORs never work because the warlords always steal the gas for the generators. A little bit of information I could have used a little earlier than that. Uh, just 2 years ago, I was delivering a Navajo from Florida to Thailand, and took off out of Saudi Arabia late afternoon in a massive dust storm. Before I got up on top, I lost my vacuum pump, which is not a big deal in an Navajo. That's why you got two engines, you got two vacuum pumps. Gotta love the redundancy. Till the second vacuum pump went. Yep, and then I was back to good old needle ball airspeed, no gyro. But that wasn't too bad. I hadn't practiced it in 25 years when I got my instrument rating, or it's probably longer than that. But I was actually relatively enjoying a needle ball airspeed situation until I looked and I noticed that my oil temperature gauge was climbing and my oil pressure gauge was dropping. Shined a flashlight out of the right side of the plane and saw that the right engine was completely full of oil, covered with oil. Felt like God was behind me running a simulator. You say, well, let's see what he can do with this one. Let's try this. And so then I had a single engine, no gyro approach into Oman. So that was kind of exciting. I think my most challenging one was I was delivering an F-33 Bonanza from St. John's, Newfoundland, straight across to Paris. Now, most of the time, you can't make the trip straight across the ocean like that from Canada to either England or Paris because it's too far. It's over 2,000 miles. But that night I had really strong tailwinds. I had to fly over 15,000 feet, not really having any oxygen, but theoretically anyway. 4 hours into the flight, I switched on the ferry tank to fill up the wing tanks and noticed that the ferry tanks weren't moving. Now, the way we use the ferry tanks is we run an outside line with a ram air tube to pressurize the tanks. So the ram air runs up a black rubber tube into the top of the ferry tank and it pressurizes the tank. And that forces the fuel out to the wing tanks. And when I turned it on, that wasn't happening. We have a sight gauge on the ferry tanks. So I took apart the hose and realized that for some reason I wasn't getting any ram air pressure. Now, I'd kind of made a huge mistake that night because I should have tested that ferry tank prior to crossing the point of no return. But seeing I'd been using it for 3 days already, I've kind of gotten complacent. And that was a pretty big mistake because I didn't have enough fuel to get back to Canada and didn't have enough fuel to get to for sure not to Paris, but I couldn't even make it to the British Isles. And even if I could, the whole southern tip of the British Isles was wiped out for with low clouds and fog, and all the airports were closed. So I was kind of stuck. And I looked at that tube and I started blowing. If I can blow up an air mattress, maybe I can blow up a ferry tank. And it worked. Although I only, after about 5 minutes of blowing, I only moved a couple of gallons of fuel and did a little calculations, realized I was going to have to pretty much blow continuously for 8 or 9 hours to get me to France. And so that's what I did for the entire night over the North Atlantic. Sat there and blew into that tube to keep the engine running. And it was pretty difficult because, like I said, I was at 15,000 feet. So I was hyperventilating, didn't have any oxygen. I was breathing a lot of 100 low lead fumes, and I hadn't slept in 2 days. So that was a long night, but I finally made it there. And I think I passed out maybe once or twice during that whole little event, but it was pretty tough because a lot of these trips, fatigue is one of the things that you're going to really fight the most, especially when you're going eastbound. Eastbound, you're constantly running across time zones. You're losing hours every time you take off. So typical days, you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, getting out to the airport, try to get off by dawn. So you don't usually get any food because nothing's open yet. Fly for 8, 10, or 14 hours. By the time you get to your destination, it's usually well after sunset, usually about 10, 11 o'clock. By the time you get to a hotel, it's midnight. Don't really have any time to get any food. Get a couple hours of sleep, get up in the morning and do it all over again. So staying awake on these flights is a major challenge, especially in the morning. Morning time's the worst because you take off, you're taking off into that climb, that rising sun, and it's just the drone of the airplane really puts you to sleep. I got to be really good at having little micro naps, little 2-3 minute naps to recharge the batteries. I figured if anything goes wrong with the airplane in that couple of minutes, I'll wake up. One of the things that always helped me stay awake, though, is I drink coffee if I had a thermos along, but didn't usually. Usually, I'd bring along a case of diet sodas, drink diet sodas all day long. Of course, if you're going to drink diet sodas all day, you know what's going to happen eventually. You're going to have to go to the bathroom. Now, when I started, all the guys used to bring along just a plastic jug to pee in, and I was never a fan of that because it was always embarrassing to have to walk into the airport carrying a jug of which is obviously not apple juice. So I developed the Ziploc bag method, just peeing into that. Actually, I developed the double Ziploc bag method. Ask me how I know you don't just trust just one. Now, it's always nice with the Ziploc baggie because if you've got a plane that has a window you can open, you can jettison the Ziploc bag out the window. No muss, no fuss. Of course, I would always save the Ziploc baggies, save my baggies for targets of opportunity, especially ships out at sea. See if you can hit them. Pilot to bombardiers. Only one time, or I should say twice, that I have to do other business in the airplane. Unfortunately, that's not as much fun and not as easy as just peeing in the plane. I won't go into great detail about it, but it involves a really weird yoga pose and a big plastic bag. So let me tell you, if you've ever been into a hot outhouse in the afternoon, it's not got nothing on doing your business in the front seat of a small plane. 1 second. Yeah, our typical flights are, about 8 to 10 hours. Africa is about 15 hours if you're going to go down to Ivory Coast. If you fly down the bulge of Africa, usually fly that at night, go from Morocco to the Ivory Coast. It's about a 14, 15-hour leg in a small Cessna. You fly it at night because when you get down toward the equator, there's the intertropical convergence zone, and there's a lot of major thunderstorms every afternoon. So you fly it at night to ensure that you get there in the morning when the weather is nice and calm. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell as far as being a ferry pilot. I've been doing it, like I said, for 30 years. I'm semi-retired now. I don't do it a whole lot, maybe by 1 or 2, 3 trips a year. Um, kind of think I've used up most of my luck, uh, but I still do it once in a while because I just love it. You know, there's just nothing, there's no adventure in the world like it, to just get in a plane and fly to the other side of the planet. I just can't get enough of it. My wife's kind of wishing that I would stop taking singles across the ocean, and I keep saying that I'm done doing that, but every once in a while I'll still do it. But if somebody's got a really cool plane that I really want to fly, or if it's going someplace that I really want to go, I can still be talked into it. Most of the time these days I spend running my skydiving school. I run a skydive Twin Cities out of Minneapolis area. I do about 700-800 jumps a summer. I'm up to 20,000 jumps now. And I fly Citation 650s for charter, a little FBO at the close to home. And that's what I do these days. So, does anybody have any questions?
We're all muted.
I have a feeling you'd be a pretty entertaining guy to drink a beer with. It seems like you have a lifetime worth of stories. It's pretty amazing. Probably the most obvious question that you get all the time, I'm sure, is what's the most beautiful place to fly over? What's your favorite place to be or go that you've seen?
Well, let's see if I can figure out how to work these pictures here. And I'll show you a couple. The most beautiful place is the southern tip of Greenland. That's the fjord running up to Narsarsuaq, Greenland. It's just gorgeous. You know, you get the icebergs all over and the Greenland ice cap. The southern tip of Greenland has got really sharp mountains, and it's just amazing to fly over. Another place that's really amazing is more Jordan. That's where they filmed the Martian, and the colors over the Jordanian desert are just amazing. This one's actually not even one of my best. I couldn't find my good picture, but it's just incredible how orange everything is. And so those are a couple of, this is a kind of a cool shot over Canada. You know, that's one of the things. I'm like you mentioned, I've got a book out called Ferry Pilot that I wrote about all my adventures, but I think one of my next books I'm going to put out is a coffee table book of just some of the incredible scenery I got. And of course, every once in a while you get to do fun stuff like buzz the pyramids with Anwar Sadat's son. Strictly illegal, but yeah. So those are some of my favorite places to fly.
Everybody should be unmuted, so if you have questions, just go ahead and jump in.
What again got you started in that line of work?
Well, I started off in aviation. I was a Huey crew chief in the Minnesota National Guard, and one of my fellow crew chiefs' father owned the company. And he told me one day that when I first met him, that he just got back from Africa. And I went, what the heck? And he told me about ferrying airplanes. And I decided right then and there, that's what I wanted to do for a living. Now, at the time, I didn't even have a license, but I had just started taking flying lessons. So I started building my hours. I started flying skydivers to help build hours and skydiving. And when I got 1,500 hours and ready, I jumped right in and never looked back.
Well, Kerry, this is Jim Price. I always wondered what it would have been to include Ferry Pilot in my pilot career, and now I know that I didn't miss a thing. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. You know, like I said, they got to find somebody stupid enough to do it. That's me. I'll show you. Here's a quick this is a shot. There's everywhere I've been. A lot of those are multiple trips around there, but that's where I've flown. And you see the one that goes over to Russia. I got lucky enough a few years to get hired to help fly a group of 6 epic airplanes around the world. We started off in Oshkosh, flew all the way around the world, and ended at Oshkosh. And that was an incredible trip because at each stop, the organizers had the coolest thing they could find to do at that location, put us up in the best hotel, got us the best food. And it was a month-and-a-half long trip that I will never forget. That was amazing.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So this is Peter Steinmetz. Fascinating stories. Thank you very much. And I am also a person who loves risk taking. So I have some questions for you. Actually, I'm also from Minnesota. I grew up in Stillwater.
Oh,
yeah.
Down the road.
Yep. But you know, it gets me to thinking, because I've had to give some serious thought to this issue about flying, about what you're doing in terms of sort of insurance and things like that. I mean, do you have a family? Do you carry life insurance on this? Is it an issue to get life insurance on this?
Yeah, it is an issue. I tried about 20 years ago or so, and they laughed for a long time. I am married. I've got married with 2 kids. Both my kids are pilots and professional skydivers, and they've kind of taken on the family business of risk taking. I got them started. You know, I pretty much intentionally put my kids in as dangerous situations as I could growing up, because I've always been a firm believer of, if you learn to do something while you're young, like if you learn to ski while you're young or learn a new language while you're young, it's easier and you're much better at it as you get older. And it's the same for taking risks and overcoming challenges. If you start doing it at a really young age, it's natural and you don't panic, and you're able to just be better at it. And that's what I did with my kids right away. I mean, I didn't get them hurt very often, but I really pushed them, and they've turned out fantastic.
Well, and of course, until you're age 25, if you're male, you think you're invincible anyway. But the other question about that I have is, maybe you mentioned it earlier, where do you run your skydiving school?
It's in Baldwin, Wisconsin, right down the road from Stillwater.
Okay, yeah, actually, my brother has done a lot of jumps with you guys. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, back in the day, about a while back. I don't know how long you've had the business, but
22 years.
Yeah, that might have been a little bit after his time, but
Well,
thank you again.
I've been jumping for 34 years, so.
Okay.
What kind of airplanes do you use in your jump school?
We've got a 182 and a 206, but we don't use those hardly at all anymore. Right now, we're leasing a Cessna Caravan with a 900 horse Garrett on it. That is a fun plane to fly. That thing's a rocket ship.
Yep.
Beat the skydivers to the ground. It's a blast. I love flying.
Yeah.
So, hey, what about like thunderstorm avoidance, all that good stuff over like Africa, Russia, or whatever, you know, the crazy places there? I'm sure they don't have that awesome flight service or flight following anyway, or how did you avoid that?
Well, sometimes you don't. My first trip across Africa, I scheduled a weather briefing in the morning as I was going to fly literally across the whole equator of Africa from Gabon to Tanzania. And I got there in the morning. The guy gave me a mimeograph paper, which was an infrared satellite shot of the continent of Africa, and 2 big white blobs on the west coast where my destination is. and he pointed at him and said, "You see this? Very, very bad. You see this? Very, very bad. Have a nice flight." And that was my entire weather briefing to fly across the entire continent. No winds aloft, no terminal forecast, no nothing. And yeah, and that was typical Africa back in the 90s. You pretty much had to just deal with what you got. Same with Russia. Even these days, Russia can be, it's not that bad, but it can be tough. And you know, most planes don't have radar. Sometimes you get a strike finder. There's lots of times that, you know, you find yourself just having to really punch through stuff, because if you're past the point of no return, you got to go. I mean, especially going to the Azores, and it's worse than anticipated. There's a number of times that I've had to land below minimums just because you've got no choice. Land or go swimming.
Terry, what kind of special pre-flight do you go through? I'm assuming a lot of these planes you're seeing for the very first time.
Yeah. If at all possible, we'll cut the filter, you know, and see if it's making oil. You know, that's the biggest challenges for a lot of these trips are the planes, because why does somebody sell a plane? They sold the plane because they're not using it. So what happens to a plane that's not being used? It starts to deteriorate. You know, a lot of these times you'll on these trips, I'll come up to a plane and it hasn't flown in a couple years. They say it just got a fresh annual, but you know, you can't really trust that. And even if it had an annual, stuff is still going to fall apart. I give it you know, I don't have an AMP, but I've pretty much done everything on small airplanes. I've been doing it for 30 some years. Got pretty good. I've taken the AMP writtens. I just never got the practical test done. So I've got a pretty good handle on stuff, but that's the dangerous part. That's the part that I have a hard time accepting about ferry flying, especially single engine airplanes, because I can accept if I get killed because of something I screwed up, I can accept that. If I pushed a bad situation, if I took off when I shouldn't have, you know, if I made a mistake, hey, that's on me. Oh, well. But if I'm halfway across the ocean and a crankshaft bearing seizes up and the engine stops, that's not my fault. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's the big danger in ferry flying. It's just there's a million parts in those planes. And it just takes one of them to stop. I mean, I've done lots of maintenance on the road. I've repaired replaced alternators, vacuum pumps. I had to make a gasket out of gasket paper in Greenland for that Navajo, for a different Navajo, but you know, you just do what you got to do. I flew a 310 from Egypt back to Minnesota one time. My boss and I happened to fly two planes there, so we flew back together. And it was a 310 that was originally a gift from the Shah of Iran to Anwar Sadat. And then after he got assassinated, he gave it to somebody else's.
Hold on.
Somebody else's. And never mind, I can't remember his name. But that plane had only had 500 hours in the last 25 years, and that thing was a piece of junk. And we really, really, really should have declined that trip. But I've got a condition. It's known as can't say no-itis. You can talk me into just about anything, and that's not necessarily good. So pre-flight them pretty well as we can.
When you pick your routes, do you, like over the ocean, do you pick shipping routes where in case you do go down, there might be something within a few hours?
No, I thought about that once. You know, I tried to figure out, there was a website that you could see where the ships were, but the shipping routes aren't really along the routes that we fly. But if I'm ever flying and I do see a ship, I always log the position in case I ever have problems. When I fly over the ocean, typically I fly as high as I can stand. I'll fly between 15 and 18,000 feet. Because that gives you the best fuel performance, best, aircraft performance. best radio performance. Plus, it also gives you the longest time to deal with any problems, if you've got an issue. And you can glide for quite a ways from 18,000 feet in a small plane. So if I know where there's a ship, I always keep track of it and plan on going back land by that. And if I ever see a cruise ship, I make double exclamation points next to that one, because if I crash next to a cruise ship, I'll be in the hot tub with a margarita within a half an hour. So
Do you have any pictures of how the planes are equipped with the extra fuel tanks or anything?
yeah, show you that. It's going to show you that. So here's a ferry system in a 402. I flew to Africa. A little aisle right there. You can see the black tube runs across here. That's the pressurization tube. That's how we pressurize the ferry tanks. And this particular plane, when I was flying across Africa, I had brought along, I didn't have a winds law forecast, and I had a long way to go, and I wasn't positive I had enough fuel to make it. So I scrounged a couple of plastic containers for fuel that I had in long Sid and a hose, and I figured I could siphon the fuel from these containers I had into the top, and well, that didn't work at all. So basically I had to take apart a water bottle, and I couldn't, you've noticed that there's not much room for the top of the tank and the headliner. I couldn't pour the fuel in the top. And so I ended up pouring it into a water bottle and putting it in, basically half a liter at a time. Oh, and I was doing this basically from this position right here. That's a photo from in flight. I'm in the back of the plane by myself. Because it's got an autopilot, and why not? And here's a picture of, here's a 182. That's the second plane I ever ferried. You can see on top, it's got an old Loran. We used to put those in there once in a while. That'd get you a couple 100 miles out from Canada. And right here is the HF radio, and sitting on top is my life raft. But if you look, that pilot seat is jammed all the way forward. And I had a hard time getting out of that plane sitting on the ramp. I didn't think I was getting out of that plane if I went down. That was going to be tough. And as long as I'm in the sharing part, here's Narsasser Greenland. This is the runway at the southern tip of Greenland. This was used by a lot of the World War II planes that were manufactured in the U.S. and then ferried across to Europe. This is a particularly dangerous airport to come into because you notice it's surrounded by mountains on all sides, plus the ice cap. You get massive winds and wind shear and turbulence coming to this place. Plus it still doesn't have a GPS approach, so it hasn't had an NDB approach, and that was scary. And there's Santa Maria the Azores. That's out in the middle of the ocean. That was a fun place to come into. Almost hit those cliffs once. There's the Greenland ice cap coming into Greenland. And that's all the pictures I got.
Where have you overnighted on your trips?
Boy, all over the place.
Greenland?
Greenland. Oh yeah, Greenland a lot. Try to avoid Greenland. The hotel there is kind of expensive, but sometimes you can't make it. So Greenland, Iceland, Scotland, England, Germany, Italy, pretty much everywhere. Greece, all over Europe, all over Africa, Asia. India's kind of funny. India's dirty. The big cities in India are pretty nasty.
How do you decide what you're going to charge the client to ferry the plane?
Kind of depends on if I'm working for a company as a subcontractor, then we negotiate the price. If I'm going, these days it's typically about $750 a day plus expenses. Back in the day when I started it, working for Orient Air, it was $1,000 for a trip to Europe, 1,500 to Africa and Middle East, and I think it was like 1,800 to Asia. Typically a trip to Europe would take a week, no matter what. I mean, theoretically you can get it done in 4 days, but that never works. There's always some holdup. Sometimes trips, you can get stuck in St. John's sitting there for 3 days waiting for favorable winds. Because when you're flying, especially pre-GPS, you don't know. So we always like to have ideally we always wanted to have a 3-hour reserve. I don't think I ever had a 3-hour reserve when I was done flight planning, but that's what we were supposed to have. But you can run into some pretty unexpected winds over the ocean, and there's a lot of guys that ran into massive headwinds that did not make it.
Do you have to do any pre-diplomatic clearance stuff, or do you just jump into a country and say, here I am?
Depends on the country. A lot of countries you have to get overflight permits. A number of countries need visas. Some countries are a real pain in the butt for visas, like China and especially Russia, because for Russia, you have to get a visa for a particular number of days, a short number of days for particular cities. And if you get a holdup, and it takes a long time to get these visas, and if you get a holdup, you miss your window, you're kind of screwed. It can be adjusted, but it's really hard. When I flew down in Africa the first time, I met a couple guys when I was in Gabon. Our company had been trying to get an overflight permit for the Congo for 2 months, and they just couldn't get them to respond. This is right before the Rwanda war, and which had nothing to do with Congo. It was just, that was the era. And I talked to these guys and said, yeah, they won't respond to you. And what happens is if you fly over their country, as soon as you check in with ATC, they'll deny you overflight permit. They'll make you land. They will then throw you in jail, steal all your radios, hold you hostage till your company coughs up with whatever they think they can get for you, and then they'll kick you loose. So they suggested that I just turn my transponder off, fly really low, and don't talk to anybody, and maybe zigzag a little bit because they did have surface to air missiles, but I didn't see any missiles, but I didn't talk to them either.
But you're not always on an instrument flight plan.
Yeah, almost all the time.
Almost all the time.
Almost all the time. Flying VFR anywhere but the US is really difficult. It's especially Europe. Europe is a pain in the butt, but anywhere. But if you're going to different countries, they really hate it VFR. You almost always have to fly IFR.
Well, and you've got to get your overflight permits ahead of time, and there's a lot of planning involved.
There's a ton of planning. And then, and stuff changes. These days you have to, for most of the big airports, you need a prior permission to come in, prior landing permission. Right. And I found that out the hard way, that it changed in Greece. I just showed up at this airport that I'd been to a dozen times, but I hadn't been there in a couple of years. And they're like, we're full. You should have called ahead. We have no place for you to park. They found a place for me, but it was like, they were kind of mad that I just showed up. Like, sorry. There's no note them, but they just expected a prior permission. So yeah, the planning and the groundwork, that's half the battle, really. I mean, you go into some of these places like Lisbon is a nightmare. You'll go in there, and as soon as you land, they give you this big sheet of paper like this, and it's got 8 boxes on it, and you have to go to 8 different offices and get a stamp. You got your landing fee stamp, you got your maintenance stamp, you got your fuel stamp, you got your weather stamp, you got the custom stamp, you got, they love their stamps in Europe. And the first time I was there, I forgot I needed I needed something out of the plane. I think I needed money or oil, or I had to go put oil in the plane or something like that. And I had to start all over. I said, well, I already got these stamps. I got, every time you come through that door, you need to get all your 8 stamps in again. It's like,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was, You really learn patience in this job, big time, big time. You learn how to kiss butts and make them feel good about their country. You know, they like to, you get some of these little bureaucrats that get a little power, and then especially an American shows up and they like to lord that power, like, oh, so you need something for me. And even though I'm this little guy in a little dreary little office in Thailand, I have the power. A lot of times it takes about $50 to change their minds for a lot of things. I like to play the stupid American though. They want to get bribed, but they won't actually come right out and say it. But they'll hint real strong, and I just like, I'm not sure. All my paperwork's here. What do you need from me? They're like, something more, something. They you know, I just let them be frustrated for a while until I cough up some money.
I've seen that in Mexico.
Yeah. They always like a little something in the passport goes a long way.
Does the client reimburse you for all these unexpected expenses?
Oh yeah, there's a part on the expense sheet. I just label it bribes. I used to call it tips, but let's call it what it is. They're bribes.
As far as for your fuel and everything else, who pays? Does that all paid in advance to you and then you pay it, or you get a company credit card, or what?
It depends. If I'm working for a company, we'll usually have a company credit card, but you always have to fly with a lot of cash, $10,000 to $15,000, because some places won't take credit cards; they'll only take cash. Some places won't take cash; they'll only take credit cards. Most places will only take brand new bills. That can be a real hassle. I mean, you're literally sitting there in India, and they'll go through each $100 bill and they'll hold it up and like, oh, this one's a little creased. This one's not going to accept that one. It's a pain. Typically, if I'm doing the trip, I just get reimbursed from the company, or from the client. Just take it.
They don't give you the money up front. You can have with you, or?
I need money up front, a best guess estimate, and then settle up at the end. But usually, I want to have a pretty sizable amount of money up front, because once the plane's been delivered, then I have no more leverage. And sometimes the people are living in foreign countries, so I don't want to get stiffed.
Jim, I think I interrupted you. You want to go ahead and go now?
Oh, I'm good.
Did you get your question answered, Jim? Okay. What about food? What do you take for that? Just snacks, stuff you can grab real quick, or?
Oh yeah, I always have a big bag of snacks, because like I mentioned, I rarely get a meal, you know, because you leave in the morning before you get food, and you get there, it's too late to go out to eat or something. So besides regular snacks, I used to bring a lot of sardines and Spam and cheese and crackers and all kinds of stuff that will survive sitting in a hot airplane out on the ramp.
So cold really isn't your issue on most of these?
No. You know, once in a while, it gets pretty cold, but usually it's the hot that gets you, especially like in South America. Oh my God. You start go flying down around the equator, and it's brutal. It's just brutal, especially when you're just getting the plane ready and taxiing and, you know, just moving around. It's just sweating like crazy. It's a pretty rare airplane that actually has an air conditioner.
There's one question in the chat. I'll just go ahead and read it, and then if you want to touch on it. While ferrying a plane, what were your two most scary in-flight airplane malfunctions, and were you VMC? Was it daytime, and were you overland? If you can narrow it down to two.
Probably the scariest one was getting struck by lightning over the Atlantic. I was flying a 206, and from the Azores in between Azores and Portugal, and flew into this really nothing cloud. You know, I wasn't even concerned about it. I even stopped reading my book, and big lightning bolt hit the prop. This big Christmas tree wreath of fire on there, and it was a huge explosion. and I couldn't believe that I wasn't gone because it had two, huge ferry tanks behind me. When I landed, there's a big chunk of the prop that had melted off. I had a quarter size hole burned in the top of the wing root coming out the top, and it had melted the wheel rim, but it didn't burst the tire, which was kind of crazy. So that was daytime. Another scary one was I was in a Mooney over Maine on the way to Bangor, Maine to get ready to go to Italy. And I encountered a line of thunderstorms, and I turned pretty much 90 degrees looking for a hole. I was talking to ATC, and I flew about 40 miles till I found a decent hole. Went into the gap. I had a strike finder at the time, and I was at 19,000 feet, and listening to music on my Walkman, and this had a nice little GPS, and I was all fat, dumb, and happy. And I heard this strange beeping sound. And as I'm in between two thunderstorms, getting kicked around pretty good, and I took my headphones off, and I thought it was the GPS, and it was kind of quiet in there. And I'm like, hey, it's not supposed to be quiet. I'd lost the engine, dead stick in between two thunderstorms at 19,000 feet. So I had to spiral down and find an airport. I got the engine back just before landing. It was a ferry tank malfunction, but that was kind of scary.
There's a Discovery Channel series. Is it still being filmed, or they just discontinued the series?
That discontinued. We only got two seasons out of it, which is a shame. It was really popular. They're actually still playing it all over the world. They're even in the Minneapolis market. They still show it. No, they canceled it because we had a cameraman director get killed in Africa. It's a real close personal friend of mine. They'd flown a caravan to Kenya, and on top of Mount Kenya, there's an airplane wreck in this big bowl canyon called Dead Man's Canyon. And he wanted our cameraman on that show. They always wanted us to go lower and slower. They always wanted us to be as dangerous as possible. But he was flying with a real good guy who said, no, we're not going any lower. That's too dangerous. And so they landed, finished the episode, and everybody went home. But the cameraman stayed there to do some, sightseeing, enjoy Africa. And he hired a doctor with a light sport to take him up to get some footage of that airplane wreck at, I think, 12,000 feet. And they stalled and spun in. So Discovery Channel decided that they'd had enough of that show, which is a shame. It's a good show.
Were you in episodes of that?
Oh yeah, I was in almost the whole series. I was one of the main pilots.
God, you look familiar. Anybody else have any more questions? Just go ahead and jump in. You don't have to.
Yeah, I got one.
decide.
You talked about cost a little bit. I'm just curious, like all in, like to get a plane from, I don't know, somewhere on the East Coast over to go with Lisbon. Like, what's it cost for, prep work, for bribes, for your fees, for everything, and you just arrange,
Yeah, that's probably going to run you about. That's not a very long trip. That's probably going to be about $10,000, maybe
Okay.
less.
All right.
Yeah. It's the ones to Singapore that add up.
I bet. Yeah.
You know what your most expensive ferry was?
Yeah.
I can guess what it was. It was the Phenom from Australia to Vegas. That was probably pretty expensive. I never added that one up, but that was a long trip, and that was pretty expensive. I'm pretty sure. Or well, yeah. I mean, I've got a couple of trips from Singapore to the U.S., and that's about as far as you can go. One in a caravan, and one in Cirrus. Yeah, Cirrus from Singapore to Ohio. That was a long trip. You can watch the whole thing. That was on one of the episodes of Dangerous Flights. Yeah, so if you watch Dangerous Flights, you'll notice that I'm not quite as nice as I am here. Because the producer told me right away, said, okay, here's the deal when you're filming a TV show. The audience either has to love you or hate you. Just don't be boring. And I said, dibs on asshole. So I'm a little grouchier and than in real life. I was lucky enough to get my daughter on one of the flights and we argued constantly. It was so much fun.
So when you get a contract for a single engine and you go, oh, it's that style, what do you look, what kind of single engine and what kind of twin engine do you look for and say, hey, I'm really going to enjoy this personally?
As far as a twin goes, no really, no Duchesses or Seminoles. Well, it's Seminoles. I like a Baron these days. 310s are nice. It really depends on the year and how nice they are. Singles, it's got to be retractable gear these days. I mean, or Caravan. Caravans are okay. If it's turbine, I'll take it. I like the turbines. They're a little more reliable. I like something with a little bit of speed because even though I get paid by the day, it's just galling to go slow. I mean, I've ferried 182s and arrows and stuff like that. And after a while, it's just like, okay, my butt can't take it like it used to anymore.
Oh, so you like a Mooney then, huh?
Moonies are nice. I like Moonies. Yeah, I've ferried a number of Moonies. They're kind of tiny that if you got to put a ferry tank in the Mooney, that's tough. I think I always had to put it covered most of the passenger seat. So getting out, you almost had to crawl over the top of the tank. So that was always a challenge.
What do you do for boredom during the flight? I mean, I think that it's pretty exciting, but I'm sure there's some dull spots.
Yeah, I read a lot. Read and listen to music. That's pretty much it. Last couple of years, I'd spent a lot of time working on my book, writing. You can even these days, you got technology. You can even bring movies along now. But when I did it back in the 90s, you only could carry so many AA batteries and so many cassette tapes. Because didn't have the stuff we have these days.
Well, we're right at about an hour. So does anybody else have any last questions?
Thank God.
All right.
All right. Well, this was absolutely fantastic.
Yes,
I got a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question. This is Charlie. What about your communications? Do you have are you in constant communications, or can you constantly call somebody, or is there a period of time when you're just out there alone?
It depends. Usually if I'm on a route that's going to be really long, we'll bring along an HF radio. It's kind of like a ham radio, and that'll allow you to contact everybody. A lot of times you can get relays through airliners if they're around, call them either on guard channel 121.5 or maybe fingers or, but there's sometimes you got nothing.
Yeah, but now that they've got the satellite phones.
I don't own one. I've used them before. I've used, on dangerous flights, they used to give us a sat phone, and we actually used that a couple times. That really helped. I probably should invest in a sat phone, but I don't know. It almost seems like cheating to be able to call somebody. It's kind of, I talk to guys now that are ferrying, they're ferrying brand new Cirruses over, and, it's all dialed in and they've got GPSs and all this stuff. And I'm just like, it's just too easy now. GPS, come on.
What a bunch of sissies.
Yeah. But I've gotten lazy too. I don't really do my due diligence and sit down with my E6B and plan for my GPS to crap out of me anymore. I just kind of, because you carry so many, I've got to a portable GPS. I always have my iPad with ForeFlight on it, and that works really good. ForeFlight works all over the world.
Mm.
It
Mm.
just, it's the having those tools these days has really made things a lot better. It's a game changer.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, one last question from my end. I remember a lot of the episodes with your daughter. Is she still ferrying? Or
No,
did she
no.
move on to something else?
Yeah, she's big into skydiving now. Skydiving, and she's a wind tunnel instructor. That's what she does most. She doesn't hardly fly at all anymore. She it's actually, it was kind of nice. I got to work with her and my son all summer at my skydiving school because of COVID shut down California where she lives. So her and her boyfriend came up and lived with us, and we spent the whole summer skydiving together as a family. It was fun, really fun.
Did you know a Jerry Bird from skydiving history?
Oh yeah, I know Jerry really well.
He was my next door neighbor back in 1962
Really?
in Linwood, California, and he got all his training at Lake Elsinore, California.
Yep. Then he went to Florida. Yeah, we used to have him come up to Wisconsin here once a summer to help us skydive. We'd have a special boogie, and he was a great guy. I love Jerry.
Is he still alive? Do you know?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I know he kind of fell on some hard times, and as like a lot of skydivers, he didn't really plan for the future very much, and so. But I guess I don't know. I don't know if he's still alive. I think he is, actually. I think I would have heard about it if he'd have died.
Okay. I tried to find his number here a few weeks ago and couldn't, so maybe I'll try again.
Yeah, probably Zephyr Hills, Florida is last time I heard where he's living.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, one quick question. Is there a PRB that you recommend, or any things that you figure are a must-have in your emergency rescue bag there?
Is there a what that I must have?
A PRB that you recommend, or any must-haves in your rescue kit?
A PRB, like a rescue beacon?
Yeah.
Right there. Happen to have it right in hand. It's a Rescue Link. I love it. I haven't had to use it yet, but it's nice and small. What I love about this, and especially ferry flying, but even regular flying, they say if you don't have it on you, like in your pocket or on your person, you're probably not going to have it. If you crash someplace and you got to get out of a burning airplane, you don't have time to go rummaging through the glove compartment to find your stuff. My main thing on survival gear is communication and warmth. Water third, food not a factor. Nobody ever starves to death these days. It's pretty rare. You don't hear these guys. I crashed in the jungle and I was there for 6 months and I used my little fishing line in my survival kit. That doesn't happen. But you can die of hypothermia really quick if they can't come get you. So I always carry space blankets, or even actually a nice tarp. I like a tarp. That's something you can make a shelter out of. Space blankets are good for just breaking the wind, but they're zero insulation. They can trap some air. You want to be able to make a fire. You really these days only need to survive for a day or two if they can find you. Have a PRB. If you go down without something, I wouldn't be counting on your ELT. ELTs are, I won't say unreliable, but they're not great. PRBs, way to go.
All right, and anybody else? Okay, well, again, it's been a great pleasure to have Kerry take time to speak to us. This is probably something that wouldn't happen in an in-person meeting, so one small thing for the pandemic. So we'll go ahead and let Kerry go if he wants to sign out at any point, and I just have a couple of club things to go over.
Where's he calling from?
I'm in Menominee, Wisconsin. Just east of Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Great presentation.
Well, thanks. Not a professional speaker, but I play one on TV. So
Well, it's been
don't forget
great.
to buy my book, Ferry Pilot. It's on Amazon. If you want a signed copy, just go to my website, kerrymccauley.com, and I'll there's a link there and I'll sign one to you and send it right out.
Sounds terrific.
And
All right.
I'll include that
Thank-
information
awesome.
in a follow-up email too, so in case
Perfect.
you weren't taking notes here during this. Any closing comments, Kerry?
No, I think we covered it all and really appreciate you guys having me. Like I said, I love ferry flying. It's a grand adventure.
All right, and I'll pass Kerry's contact
Thank you.
information too if you have any follow-up things later on, or you find yourself in that part of the world, you want to take a skydiving lesson.
Yeah, I'll check you out of an airplane.
All right, Kerry, you're welcome to stay on, but if you're ready to go, you're welcome to disconnect yourself.
I'll take my leave. See you guys. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye,
Thanks
thank
very
you.
much.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for attending. I've been waiting and waiting for some type of normalcy to return. Looks like it's probably going to be the new normal for quite a while. So I'll get something arranged to do monthly, consistent VMC meetings. The VMC meetings originally were set up to just last 20 or 30 minutes with the question of the month and the short scenario that they do if you've been to any of the meetings. I just made them longer, into an hour and a half to kind of make it more worthwhile, especially for those of you who drove an hour or more in. That way, we had more substance to it. So look for something like that, like a short 30-minute, 40-minute meetings monthly. Joe, of course, has already done a couple of IMC ones, and he'll keep doing that. We're deciding whether we wanted to hook up again and do an IMC and VMC together on the same night, or have him do the first Tuesday and I'll do the third Tuesday or something like that, or have them the meetings at the exact same time where you'll have the option of either joining the IMC room or the VMC room. But we'll do some more talking about that, and I'll probably send out some kind of survey so everyone can put some kind of input, what they think would be most beneficial to them. But it looks like webinars is probably it for a while. The meeting room at the airport is limited to just 10. They want everybody separated. And as you remember from meetings, we were usually standing room only, so probably won't be useful or too nice to the 45, 47 people that we would have pack it in every month. So, but we'll decide on something and be more consistent from now on. I don't know when the next meeting will be or whether Joe's going to do a first Tuesday, since that's also election night. But it might be a nice break for everybody if he does. So, does anybody
this was a
have
great
any
meeting.
questions?
It's a great meeting.
Thank you. I
Absolutely.
appreciate that. I
Sure.
thought, yeah, for our first one, it would be a lot more fun than doing our normal little scenario and question of the month, to have a world-class flyer join us. And when I found Kerry and he was willing to visit with us, I thought that was a great opportunity for myself to do the first VMC meeting of the year, post-pandemic.
Well, it goes to show you can get somebody from any part of the country and they don't even have to leave their living room.
Yeah, so we can have all kinds of people.
That
So
was good.
that's, yeah, so also, I mean, if anybody wants to do a meeting, you can share pictures and videos and what have you, we can easily do that. The same way here, I'll host the meeting and then I'll connect you like I did Kerry, where you can share your screen and any files that you have. You want to go over something safety related or trip planning or something fun, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll be looking for ideas if we want to expand the webinar beyond the normal frame of the VMC club. So feel free to share whatever you want, and we can do them whatever night we want too, because we're not held to the restraints of the meeting room at the airport, which was, we always had to pre-schedule that. So does anybody have any other comments? I did ask everyone to put their Wings email for the FAA's safety.gov email that you use, so you can get Wings credit, and I'll go through that. But if I miss anybody, you don't get credit in 2-3 days, then make sure you email me. So just means I missed you, and that way I can make sure I get you added. And if you were attending any of Joe's 2 previous IMC meetings and you did not get credit, I know the very first one, I only gave credit to 1 person, and there had to have been a dozen or more people in that one. I didn't attend the second one, I was on the road, but I heard that was a pretty good turnout too, and I think I only gave credit to about 6 or 8 people, so I know there was a bunch missing. So just email me, I can go back. I recently became a Wings Pro, not that that means anything, but I know how to get around the system and give credit for prior things, or without doing the email that you normally get from the FAA. So
We just need our name and our email address, right? And our phone number, or what?
nope, just your email address that ties with your account with the FAA. That's it. I don't need
Okay.
name or phone number or anything else. So as long as I've got that, then you'll get credit. It's like 1 credit basic. I don't remember what number, but
Well, Alex, thank you
it's
for
worth
all
it.
your efforts.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Good
I hope
job.
it was enjoyable, and
Very.
everyone's welcome to sign out at any point. If you want to talk amongst yourselves, everybody should be unmuted. If you're not, please unmute yourself. And,
All I
get
can
everybody's
say,
name in there.
all I can say is after listening to Kerry, I'm really appreciative of being able to fly in the United States. It sounds like when he gets outside the borders, it gets pretty difficult.
Yeah, I think it's quite a bit different. We don't realize the privileges that we have and freedoms compared to other
Absolutely.
countries.
Yep.
I think if I
But we
was
gotta
him, I
hang
would
on
have
to
killed
those
myself
too.
about 20 times, over. So he's got a
I
lot
don't
of
think he gets paid enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Some of the best flying or the best fun experience I've had is flying to Mexico. The prominent airports like Guaymas and San Felipe and down to Mulahay, where the Americans go a lot. They're really friendly and they take really good care of you. I've had a couple of instances where we needed to work on the plane, we needed fuel and things like that, and they're very accommodating. And I didn't get anybody trying to have me give them extra money,
Surprised he carries so much cash with him, how he's not a victim.
Really.
Hey, Joe, since you're there, do you have any plans for your next IMC meeting? Are you going to do it on election night, or?
I'm gonna do it on Monday for that very reason, so.
Yeah, good idea.
We're all set up. I don't want to hear any more advertising for politicians, so we'll do it on Monday. I'll have an online list. I didn't want to send it out early because I didn't want them to confuse it with this meeting, but the regular sign-on list, I have one on the cloud now that I'll send it out there. People can sign up early for it and stuff. But you did a great job here. This is wonderful. We have what, 40 people or so on this one. This is excellent. And that guy was a superb speaker. We got to finding some other people from out of town that are willing to do this.
Joe, how's your sign-up sheet coming? Are you going to do that? That'll be a
Yes,
little
I'll
different.
put it online probably tomorrow. I just didn't want to confuse anybody for tonight.
Okay.
But that should work fine. I'll send it out. I'll tell you when I'm sending it out, and you can be the first one to sign it.
Well, you guys are doing a great job setting up these meetings. I love them.
Yep,
Keep it up.
they're great. They're
You're
great.
welcome.
What
Definitely.
do you have in the
I'll-
back, Charlie? What do you have in the background? All different color flowers or something?
Oh, my wife. She makes,
Oh,
she
sure.
makes Christmas
sure.
wreaths. Yeah. She makes Christmas wreaths. She makes Halloween wreaths. She makes Easter wreaths, and she doesn't sell them. They're all over the damn house. I keep telling her, you need to sell these things.
You don't have your own room?
I'm in it. I'm in it.
Oh, geez.
That's your man cave.
That's quite a man cave, Charlie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, one other thing. The meeting, I did record it, though this is my very first time using Zoom, so I'm not quite sure that it worked. If it did, and you want to rewatch any part of this, I'll see if I can put a link on YouTube or something like that. Or if you had a friend or something that wanted to see it and just couldn't get away from the World Series tonight to join us.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I do have a couple friends that I know would want to see this.
Yeah. So I'll
Yeah,
see if I can do that, but I can't promise because I don't really know how it works. I have to have my son
Well-
tell me the ins and outs.
I can help you with that too if you want.
Okay,
It's fair.
thank you.
Yeah. The key thing right now is if you recorded it locally or whether you recorded it to the cloud. If you recorded it locally, as soon as you end the meeting, it will do this big, long conversion and save it to your local disk drive. Just make sure nothing happens during that conversion, and then you'll have it. And then we can, I've got some thoughts on where to put it too, if you want, and how to make it accessible. So.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I'll talk to you about
And just
that.
one
This
more
is-
thing I want to say, you guys, you did great. The speaker was great. And that's one thing I found too, like a lot of these people that speak, especially somebody like, Kerry, he had a book to plug. They are really happy to be able to sit in their room and give a 1 hour talk. And so really the key is just ask. Think of in your wildest dreams, all the people you'd like to come and just ask. And, some percent will say yes. It's really an amazing time for that.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is.
So again, nice job. That guy was great.
Thank you so much. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
Thank you.
All
Well,
right,
yeah,
well,
Alex,
then-
this is Craig from the FISDO. I'd just like to compliment you on just a terrific job, a great speaker. Joe too. Last week. Hey guys, you're doing a great job, and just keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, really.
And I want to appreciate people offering me their Zoom service. I have signed up, so we won't get cut off in an hour anymore. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
but,
good.
Craig, I would have taken you up in a heartbeat, but I think it's because you're so secure there, everybody would have to sign on individually. It'd be tough on them.
Well, if it becomes a problem, let me know, because there's some easy workarounds on it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully, I thought it was 100 and something a month when it turned out to be a year, so it's not a big deal at all. No.
Copy.
Yeah, and the FAA one, actually, I've signed on, the flight training work group. It's actually pretty easy, and the FAA biannual meetings. So with Craig, it's not too bad. I mean, you just have to have the password and be allowed in, and it is. I think you allow 300, right?
I think it's like 340.
Yeah. See, that's
It's
more-
a weird
more than
number,
enough.
but yeah, it's over 300.
But yeah, if we need to, we'll definitely reach out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
no,
it's got all the same controls, and they all look the same. It's just, I guess the powers that be have decided it's more secure for our purposes.
Yeah. So it's definitely something to fall back on. This particular Zoom was by generous donation of CMU University, where my son's at. So we're using his
There you
account at the
go.
moment. Okay, so everyone can sign out, or I'm gonna sign everybody out in one shot here if nobody else wants to talk among themselves or have anything else to
Thanks, Alex.
add. You're very welcome.
We'll see you.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah,
Thank
see
you.
everybody next Monday.
Thank you. Good night.